My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a very special podcast about the special and significant, yes, very significant conversations we can have to be more fully alive. And today might be one of the most significant, if not sacred, conversations we have here in the studio around a very delicate topic, and that is self-harm, mental health, and yes, we're even going to talk about suicide. Listen in. Well, Crystal, it is fantastic to have you in the studio for the very first time, having a really sobering and honest conversation. And I'm excited and really honored to have that conversation with you. But before we jump into our conversation around our 3 words, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Crystal King. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, but now I currently live here in Bowling Green, Ohio. Me and my husband went to school and we met here in Bowling Green, and now I work in the public health field, supporting mothers and babies.
I love that. Well, we're so glad to have you here today to talk about 3 words that you initiated with us, and I was so thankful when you did because I think it's an important conversation. What are our 3 words for today?
Talk about suicide.
You know, we have actually, as a part of the 3 Words podcast family, entertained the possibility of having a series on talk about this or talk about this or talk about that. And I think this was actually in the list to talk about something that is so personal, that is so tragic, and it affects so many people. To talk about an honest conversation here today about suicide. Crystal, why is this particular topic so very important to you?
Yeah, so this topic is very important to me because I have actually lost 3 members of my family to suicide, and they were all men. They were all under the age of, I would say, about 45 years old. But most recently was actually my brother Christian. And he had just turned 30. We just had a joint birthday. I turned 21. He turned 30 years old. And he also had 5-month-old twins. And he unfortunately took his life in September of 2021. So this topic is just super important to me, super near and dear to my heart. And because we really saw, like, me and my mom, because it was only us 3, really saw like the devastating effects of suicide, especially like on our own mental health as well. Yeah.
Well, for sure. I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your brother. Obviously, our family cares deeply for you and Anthony, and in many ways for the many difficult things you've been through. Obviously, Anthony's been here in the studio before and talked about the really challenging lives that both of you have had, but also just shedding light on important issues, whether they're social justice or, in this case, mental health. And I'm just really honored to be able to have this conversation with you today. You know, one of the things that I wanted to share just as we begin this conversation would be this, that sometimes the most courageous conversations in life tend to be the most uncomfortable ones. So thank you for stepping into what can feel like discomfort for you, but also I know your heart, I know you personally, and you want this to be kind of an alarm for those who are listening, our viewers and listeners from all over the world, to really think more deeply about this. We had talked a little bit off camera, but statistically, this affects more people than we would imagine. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So the statistics are very alarming, and they show that this is a conversation for everyone. According to the CDC, over 49,000 people died by suicide in 2023. And those numbers are actually, I saw some graphs from 2000 until 2023, because that's the most current data that they have. And the rates are actually increasing slow but steady, and they are on an upward incline. So this actually breaks down to 1 death every 11 minutes. So by the end of our conversation today, 1 person will lose their life to suicide. And I think this really impacted me because it's like my brother, like, he had so many dreams, so many visions that he really wanted to do, and unfortunately did not have the chance to. And actually, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. And also, suicide was the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34. Rates, so actually males make up 80% of suicides, which is so interesting because in my family, 3 males have died by suicide. And then it is also important to highlight that suicide is like the tip of the iceberg for people, and that 12.8 million people actually seriously thought about suicide in 2023. So these are all stats from the CDC. And it really just shows like we have a deeper mental and emotional health issue that is going on like within our nation and within our world as well.
Well, I love obviously elevating and putting a spotlight on mental health. In fact, I do a lot of coaching and a lot of speaking to organizations around mental health. And I'm not even sure I'm a big fan of the term mental health. I prefer the term health.
Right.
And as a part of health is obviously our emotional well-being, our mental well-being, our physical well-being. But sometimes we put it in this category called mental health that feels almost stigmatized.
Yes.
It almost feels like I can't talk about that there's something more wrong with me than if I had a blood clot or diabetes or cancer. It tends to feel almost shameful. But I think what you're highlighting, and I think what we all kind of know and feel, is that the mental, emotional, even spiritual dimensions of our life, they play so much into our overall health. Now, my guess is you've thought a lot about, since the passing of your brother and even your other family members, just signs to be looking for. Can you maybe share a couple of those things, just signs or things that maybe you have seen or would help us as listeners and viewers, and even me as the host, to be able to keep my eye on as you're spending time with people you love and care about?
Yes, I would definitely say changes in behavior, even if they're subtle, could be a sign. Also, isolation could be a sign. Like the brain fog, like, you're talking to a person, but are they really paying attention to you, or do they have something else on their mind? I believe that is also one that I've seen. And also, like, I was speaking with a friend, and she was actually like telling her story about when she was bullied when she was younger. And she said that she was bullied during school and she would act out. And also, when she would come home, she would just isolate and she would be angry and things like that. But her dad never knew that she was getting bullied, because a lot of the times the emotions, the outward facing emotions that we see are actually leaves on the tree, of a deeper issue. So I think that is a lot of, what happens too. So just be curious and ask questions and really show compassion and care when you see differences in behaviors of, your loved ones.
When I actually have heard about this notion of ask twice rule, that sometimes when you say to someone like, how are you? People can quickly, that triggers, oh, fine, good. But to maybe go a little deeper, maybe ask the question twice and say, hey, really? Or one of my favorite questions I ask for people I care about that I might be picking up something's off is be like, hey, can I ask you, how are you doing really? And I just add that really just to kind of maybe give them an opportunity to be able to share something maybe a little bit deeper. You can even go a step farther and say something like, hey, I know you pretty well. We're pretty close friends, or I have known you well enough to feel like something's a little off. I want you to know that there's nothing you could ever tell me that would ever make me feel differently about you, and that you can always share whatever, and it's not going to affect our relationship. But I care about you, and I just feel like something might be off. And again, there's different ways to approach that, but the issue is not to fix people. It's to be present with people and to let them know you care. Sometimes conversations around suicide or mental health make us nervous because we feel like it's going to actually invite darkness. But conversations, honest conversations about suicide, as you have initiated with us today, they don't invite darkness, they illuminate darkness. They allow us to see and bring out of the darkness things that maybe are buried and need to be talked about. You know, one of our podcast episodes, as well as one of the books I wrote with my best friend, Dr. Bo Johnson, is 3 words: be fully known. And oftentimes people who are struggling with depression, thoughts of suicidal ideation, considering taking their own lives, or even deep depression, oftentimes feel unseen and unknown. And so I guess my encouragement to our listeners and viewers, if you're feeling those things, even to find one person to say, I'm feeling these things, whatever is in the darkness has power. When it comes into the light, it doesn't always get fixed, but it definitely loses some of the intensity of its power. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with that because that's actually one of the myths that, I saw is that if you ask someone, are they, having suicidal ideation or anything, that it actually doesn't put the thought in their mind if they are not, but it brings to light the issues, that are underlying. So I definitely agree with that.
Well, I think, wouldn't we all, for the people who we love, wouldn't we rather overstep a little bit than kind of say, well, I don't want to come across as strange or weird, but to actually, it's to step a little bit farther in. Yes. And I think even the phrase that I've heard used in the counseling realm is, have you ever had thoughts of hurting yourself? Because even that word suicide tends to be so powerful, but just, have you ever had thoughts of hurting yourself? And if you have, I just want to know about it. There's not judgment here, but I want to be able to have that conversation with you, because especially if we see these various signs. Obviously, as we kind of turn the conversation toward the end of our conversation, toward the final part of our conversation, Crystal, are there anything that you would want us to know as listeners and viewers about you wish you would have known them in regards to grieving through someone who you've lost to suicide, that maybe you didn't know before, that could be really helpful for those of us who have encountered that or might encounter that at some point in the future?
Yes, I would definitely say around, and I didn't know that actually family members are called survivors of suicide, which is so interesting. It just never occurred to me, but I, have read that. And I believe that these unfortunate deaths, that they come with a lot of shame attached to it. Even I recall when I, told others that my brother had died and things like that, and they would ask, I didn't want to say that he died by suicide because of the shame, because of the stigma that comes with it, because of the assumptions that could come with, you guys, weren't loving him or different things like that. But what I've learned is that it's not our fault. It's not the surviving family members' fault about this. But that what we see is, unfortunately, if there is, hypertension or diabetes, like you were saying, the end is a certain thing. And the end, to these deep emotional wounds, unfortunately, sometimes is this outcome. So I would just say it's not our faults, and to really encourage them to just hold that.
I think the two most important things that we've talked about in our short conversation today, and we could talk for hours about this, and I'm sure we will in other contexts talk more about mental health, is that it isn't the survivor's fault. And even for someone who is considering this or struggling with these thoughts, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So I think for both the person who's struggling and the strugglers around that individual, that we need to talk about these things. We need to bring them out into the light, and not in a shameful way or a judgmental way, but people will be so thankful because there's a lot at stake here. I mean, this is a human life. Like you said, your brother with dreams and passions and children, that that there is help out there. And I think for those who are listening who might be feeling some of those things, that there is help out there. There's hotlines, there's friends and family I know for a fact that care about you deeply if you're listening and viewing this particular episode, and you're feeling and experiencing and having some of those thoughts. Please, please, please reach out. Crystal, obviously you initiated this conversation as a part of 3 Words Podcast. I'm going to give you the final word, final thoughts, final insights, or just words of encouragement that you might want to give to our viewers and our listeners today.
Yes, I would say to learn more, to spread awareness, but also to evaluate your own wellness journey. And like you said, there are hotlines. 988 is one in particular, just like 911. But it is primarily for mental and emotional crises. And also, the only person who really got me through this was God. So I do want to say that, and that my hope had to be in him throughout this entire journey, or I feel like, me and my mother would have a different outcome right now, and I wouldn't even have the strength to have this conversation. So I just want to, put that out there as well.
Thank you, Crystal. And you are always welcome in the 3 Words Podcast studio. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today for this very sobering and honest conversation around the topic of suicide. We care about you. Wherever you are on your journey and whatever you might be feeling, you are part of the 3 Words Podcast family. In fact, I would just encourage you, if you've not yet had opportunity to subscribe to our monthly newsletter, there's some really delicate topics that we address within that digital newsletter. You can subscribe by going to dmbcoaching.com/subscribe, where we're talking about topics like this, mental health, emotional well-being, as well as how to become the best version of yourself in a variety of dimensions of your life. So until the next time we're together, I hope you're well.